Hello, I'd like to talk about the art of movement, unpublished writings of Rudolf Laban. These writings I found in a library in the north of England, the Brotherton Library in Leeds. I found pencil written notes written on the back of old publicity, fascinating notes that start in German and then go into French and then come back into German again. When I found those, and when I found other articles which I know have never been translated and probably never been seen since their publication in the 1920s, I thought this is this is the stuff of a book, because Laban, certainly in England, is only known for the 5 books that he wrote in English, not the German books. They haven't been translated. My Laban source book uh, does have some quotations from his German writings, but they're only a few thousand words each. So this book gives you the chronology of Laban, not only in his own words, these writings which have been transcribed and then really beautifully translated by Pat Lehner, but also, let us say, takes on Laban by people who knew him. In this archive in the Brotherton Library in Leeds, there are something like 112 interviews with people who knew Laban: Kurt Jooss, Martin Gleisner, Gertrude Snell, Albrecht Knust. Some of them have been transcribed really awfully. So in fact, I've transcribed the whole lot. That was my COVID project. So the introductions to the texts in this that we've chosen for the art of movement consist of different accounts of what Laban was like as a teacher, as a choreographer. The story of his dance script and how it developed. Now, what you get from these different interviews is a very multiple Laban. And you'll find people taking credit for things that somebody else will take credit for. So, for example, Fritz Klingenbeck, who did work with Laban and did take over Laban's dance parts after Laban was injured, he also claims to have been hugely important in the development of dance script. He, of course, says that Albrecht Knust had very little to do with it. You get the picture. So the structure of the book follows Laban's chronology. From the 1910s, when he started developing his approach, actually to dance script as well, though we've not got much about that. But he started his schools in Zurich. And then in the 1920s, surely a decade of almost impossible activity, when he started, all students of his started multiple schools throughout Germany and beyond, and when he created most of his choreographies, and when he really developed his dance script. So that's part two, the 1920s. The 1930s are his time leading up to the Nazi takeover of Germany in 1933, and then his departure in 1937, and finally his arrival in England in 38. That's part three. The final part is his time in England, the 20 years between 1938 and 1958. So what you get over these 4 parts are texts written by him in programs, certain times a long letter, his lectures. He sometimes, in performances in the 1920s, they were preceded by a lecture. And the programs would include an article, let's say, about the nature of what he called lay dance. We might call it community dance now. We might think of it being movement choirs now. But it's that idea of amateur dance. So first of all, you have, as I say, these texts written by him which haven't been published, certainly in terms of the newspaper articles, for something like 100 years. And then you have these handwritten notes which have never ever been published because they must have been sketches for a work that never really appeared. And before each of these texts, let's say it's a text about dance script, you'll have excerpts from these interviews from people, I've already mentioned Fritz Klingenbeck, claiming, oh yes, it was me that did that. Then I will put somebody else who will say, yes, well, of course, it was me that did that. And I'm sorry, my friend, we just can't be sure who is right. And I think that's more truthful than making up some Laban. When it comes to Laban the teacher, you'll find exactly the same. I won't even call them disagreements. I'll call them different takes on Laban the teacher. The same with Laban the choreographer. Sigurd Leder, in a beautiful interview, describes the improvisational nature of Laban. It's fascinating to see him go around, oh, just put a chair there and let's just put this there and see how that looks. And then maybe we could play with this music. And there are all these maybes, which after 2 or 3 hours turns out to be a pretty finished piece. And then Rita Zabekov, who worked with Laban in the early 30s, would say, oh, whenever we redid, and he did remake many of his pieces, he was so generous. He just gave us complete carte blanche to do whatever we want. In part 3, if you remember, that's the 1930s up until his departure from Germany. In 1937, after his disgrace, when he offered something for the 1936 Olympic ceremony, and it was cancelled because it may have been his vision of German dance, but it certainly wasn't that of Goebbels, the person in charge of propaganda. So he was, by 1937, in disgrace. But still, he wrote out a full scenario for Gaukelei. It might be called the juggler or the trickster. Why? In 1937, when he's disgraced, and there's no chance at all of this being ever done in Germany, certainly not under the Nazis, why did he do that? He seemed to return to his choreographies continually throughout the 20s and 30s. So that's really the book. It's a book of never before seen texts, and it's a book that gives you a real vivid sense of Laban in his own words and in the words of those who were his relatives, his friends, and his students. And it's probably about 15 or 16 different Labans. And my friend, it's up to you to decide which one you want.